finishing up on, because we've touched on it, the development of players. Again, harking back to our conversation with Tony Hanks. Tony was very focused on when Wass sat down and looked at how Sevens featured as a player's development. The first and foremost was it was taken on an individual by individual case. He used Christian Wade as an example. With Christian, they saw him very much being a 15s player, but they felt that he would benefit as a player from skills and the fitness side of it, from actually taking some time out to actually go and be a sevens player. Is that something that you feel quite strongly about in terms of how do you feel about that? It's kind of what I'm trying to ask.
I think it's spot on. Absolutely spot on. It's exactly the model that we adopted when I coached England. That was exactly the model. You had your core seven specialist players. I had Ben Gollins, I had Simon Amor, I had Tony Rock. They were the heartbeat of the team that everything was built around, because that's where their pinnacle was, and that's how they were. They were seven specialists. That was where they could be the best they could be. But out of that, then you know, I got given Matthew Tate, an 18-year. Well, look, you know, he needs to work on this, and this, and he needs to learn how to play in high-pressured environments. But he's the real deal. So you have him for a year, and that's what we did with Matthew Tate. Same with Ben Foden. You know, and it was on an individual basis, because they play all this kind of 15s, and it's what they're used to. It's the norm. But they've never been put in a different environment, high-pressure environment, where, you know, rugby sevens magnifies any mistakes or weaknesses you had. So in order to rectify or get better, you have to have them magnified, and that's what the sevens provided these young players. And it was that's why I said it was part of their learning. Some of it's tough learning, some of it's great learning, depending whether you're on the right side of the win or the loss. But you have to separate that all out and work out, well, how can we make your strengths better, and how can we ensure that your weaknesses are eradicated. And you know, the way that Tony talks about it with Christian is spot on. You know, you probably had a weakness in conditioning, so they wanted to stretch him in that area. Probably needed to learn how to tour. Probably needed to know how to manage his body before, during and after a tournament, because in the game of sevens, in a day, you play 3 games, you've got to come up, you've got to come down, you've got to come up, you've got to come down. Very different to 15s, where it's a build up, play, and then come down. So understanding your body, mentally how to get yourself right, is an education in itself for a young player. And in a game of 15s, he probably touches the ball, well, he probably touches it a lot more at the moment, but on average, let's say 4 or 5 times a half, he's going to touch that, double that, in 7 minutes of sevens. So as a consequence, he's got to be more comfortable on the ball and off the ball to ensure that he minimises mistakes. So, you know, there are so many positives for it to work for an individual at a certain time. And it's got to fit into, as he said, into the WASP's agenda as well, because ultimately he's paid by WASPs, whereby actually we are better off being without him for this period of time, because we'll get him back this period of time later, a far better thing. So we can, you know, you can take a risk analysis of when's the best time to allow him to do it. And I think that's the right way to do it for every Premiership club. If they're doing their job properly and developing their players, they weren't reliant on Christian Wade when he was 20 years old. They are now. But they are now because he's probably had those experiences. And under pressure DORs sometimes think it's about that 20-year-old, when actually, whether he holds the bag as 23rd man on a Saturday or not, of course he might end up on the bench, but you know, that's the risk you take, where you could then go off to Hong Kong and Dubai, and he comes back tenfold more confident and better for the experiences, which then serve you in greater stead 12 months down the line.
Do you think some of the Premiership clubs would find it more advantageous or beneficial for the development of certain players if they perhaps did partnerships with some of the elite, the top elite invitational sides?
I think so, but I think the whether when you say the elite side, you mean the invitational, do you mean the countries?
The invitational.
I think that becomes. I think on a very ad hoc basis that's fine, but I think in order for a player's development, you've got to allow them to buy into it for a sustained period of time. When I say that, you've got to be prepared to be flexible as a club for 12 months for them, because I think in order for them to, you know, they need consistency a little bit as well. In order for a player to benefit from it, he has to be in the groove, the conditioning. He has to learn and understand, which is kind of how we looked at it from the international level. It was a year-on-year effect. The problem you have with DORs are that they kind of live month to month for fear of what's around the corner, and being feared, well, the reason that's happening is because you let that 20-year-old go off. The realities are that's not the case, but you've got to be under the comfort that you're dealing with people that understand the long-term picture over the short-term goal. So I think allowing them to get involved in elite invitation stuff, I don't see a great benefit to the club unless it's a mental and a psychological one for a player that actually it might be good for you to go and play this tournament.
Yeah.
You know, but I don't see it. I don't see it as a real thing unless they're going to do it for a sustained period. But the very nature of the Elite Sevens season, it's sporadic.
If it was more structured, if the RFU created some form of league format.
If they created a league format in the UK, that would probably take place between May and July. The only issue you have then is how that fits in with the players' conditioning, and then their season that they come out of and the season they're going into. So what you could say is, right, we're going to put you in that 7 season there, which means that we're going to tailor your conditioning here and your conditioning afterwards, which means then we know you're going to be available come October, November time. If that happens, yes, then that makes logical sense to me. Absolutely.